Hello and welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Harlock, and we are about to embark on a very ambitious year in review, actually part one of our year in review. I have a tendency to want to reminisce about things sometimes. Maybe it's just this time of the year, I don't know, for looking back. But that's what this show is. We're going to take a look back. We're going to review the people we talked to and some of the themes that we talked about. But I talked to a lot of people this year. Right, so that's why I'm breaking this year in review up into two parts. So this is part one, and part two will cover the second half of the year. This episode is from January through the very beginning of July. So we are going to take a quick sponsor break right now. And for that, I'm just going to give a shout out to our sponsors that we had throughout the year. So many thanks go to IND Hemp in Montana, Impactful Ventures, New Holland Agriculture, Amerishon Cast Hemp, King's Agri-Seeds, Westtown Bank, and the folks over there at iHemp Michigan. So yeah, thank you all for your support of our show. It brings me joy to know that you support what we do because we have something special here, and through your support we get to continue doing it. All right, so that was the sponsor message. All right, so if you go back to the beginning of this year, to the first episode of 2022, you might remember that we were having a bit of an existential crisis on the show. You remember that? I was getting pressure from the corporate folks downtown, like maybe you should change the name, maybe we need to expand the content. So we started the year just kind of like not totally sure where we were going, but I knew we were taking a slightly expanded approach. You know, I wanted to bring in to the conversation more talk of regenerative agriculture and other things that weren't quite related to hemp, but definitely harmonized with the message of hemp. So that's where we started. The very first episode was my introduction to the new season. And then that second episode of Season 2 was an interview with Michael Lewis. He's a sustainable agricultural specialist at the National Center for Appropriate Technology. He's also a board member for the HIA, the Hemp Industries Association. He's got a regenerative farm in southeastern Kentucky, right at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. He's a student of Wendell Berry. And last year we had a great conversation about regenerative agriculture and sort of the practices in there, and how it's not just the practices, but it's also like the mindset that you have to sort of get into.
You know, philosophically, things which I feel like we've sort of forgotten and become disconnected to, which is what drew me to regenerative agriculture, right? It's not a thought process that we just have to think about how we're going to get our corn or beans out of the field. It's all these other things that are interconnected with it. And I think regenerative agriculture helps me conceptualize that we're all connected. And this is about finding that balance between profitability, land abuse, and, you know, what we're leaving for our legacies, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's Michael Lewis. Also, before we move on to the next episode, I wanted to let you know about this really cool document that Michael Lewis has created along with Jody McGinnis from the HIA, and it's published at the National Center for Appropriate Technology's website. Part of their ATRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. It's like an 8-page document about industrial hemp production. I'll just read you the intro here. It says, this publication explains that industrial hemp is an agricultural crop grown for grain, seed, and fiber, and introduces several important considerations given the regulations that govern hemp production in the United States. It explores a variety of uses for hemp and provides production information as well as further resources. Yeah, so that's a free download. It's a PDF. I will put a link to it on the show page for this episode. All right. Also on that second episode last year, we got to know Michael Montera. He's from Impactful Ventures, one of our gracious sponsors this past year, and going into 2023 too. So thank you, Impactful Ventures. On episode 3, we got to know Ben Dobson from Hudson Hemp and Hudson Carbon. So Ben is a farmer and carbon researcher. He's the founder and president of Hudson Carbon in Hudson, New York, and he's become a bit of a pioneer in the carbon farming space. His farm in the Hudson Valley is a soil laboratory where researchers are studying how organic regenerative farming can maximize carbon capture and restore ecosystems. And he said in the interview that for every 1 ton of real soil carbon that you add to your soil, you've actually removed 3.67 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So every acre of hemp can potentially store 2 to 3 tons of carbon in the soil, he said. And if you multiply that by 3.67, an acre of hemp then can potentially remove 7.34 to 11.01 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Roughly speaking, he says, if this country did 50 million acres of hemp, we would be sequestering a couple 100 million tons of carbon per year on that acreage. And that's a huge opportunity.
We have a lot of problems, and we also have a lot of opportunities. And we have farmers across our landscape who have shown time and again that they're ready to respond to the best of opportunities when they're given them. And I think hemp's been one of those examples. So I have a lot of hope. Because I have a lot of kids. We need to be hopeful, what we found is we really feel there are real solutions that are community based and local, but could add up to a global one.
On episode 4, we talked to some folks in North Carolina. First, we met Victor Allen Weeks and Jalen Madden, the founders of 40420, a hemp startup in Yanceyville, North Carolina. Victor Allen Weeks talked about their E-cubed approach, focusing on equity, education, and the environment.
Equity, one specifically, because it'd be remiss if we didn't just understand our own identities as Black men in the South, where hemp and just like the cannabis plant has been criminalized, and there are a lot of stereotypes and stigmas around, one, the plant, but two, various groups of people in this region of the United States and in the world. So we wanted to step into the industry and a standpoint to shift what people's perception were. So we could say, hey, we are here to, one, bring education. This ties back into the other E. And two, change what that equity looks like. So instead of being over-policed or hyper-surveilled around this plant in this industry, we can bring economic development to the table.
Then on that same episode, we heard from Drew Kitt, who runs a shop in Asheville called Two Moon CBD. And he also works with iHempX and the Global Hemp Association.
The shop is kind of my labor of love. It's local to my house, so it's very convenient. For me, it was an opportunity to say, okay, I need an office because I'm going to be calling up, talking to farmers and about seeds, but I need a place to work out of. So why not have a shop where I'm serving the local community?
And then on episode 5, we caught up with Tim Almond, founder and chairman of Heartland Industries, a Detroit-based biotech company that had just been awarded funding through USDA's Conservation Innovation Grant Program for their Hemp for Soil project that is going to study hemp's effect on soil health when in rotation with corn and soy.
It's small plots, 5 to 10 acres. It's a 3-year program where we're doing hemp, a traditional crop like corn or soy, and then hemp again the following year, and running soil tests and carbon tests to see what the change is and to better explore what might actually be possible using hemp as a rotation as well.
Also on episode 5, we talked to James Gaspard from Biochar Now, a Colorado-based company making biochar at scale. James explains what biochar is, how it's made, and how it can be a very powerful tool for soil health and carbon sequestration.
It's a fair-haired child lately because of the carbon sequestration angle. We at Biochar Now have been doing this for over 12 years, but it's like we persevered, and now the world is catching on to the benefits of biochar.
And then at the end of February last year, beginning of March, right in there, I had the opportunity to go to Denver to attend the National Farmers Union Convention. It's their annual convention. And they presented me with the Milton D. Hakel Award for Excellence in Agricultural Journalism. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I didn't know too much about the Farmers Union before going there, but I learned a whole lot there, and I love what they're up to. I met so many great farmers from around the country, including podcast listener Ray DePriest up there in Alaska, Alaska's very first hemp grower. And I also had a quick interview with Senator John Tester from Montana and Colorado's Commissioner of Agriculture, Kate Greenberg. And that's not all. I had the opportunity to sit down for a long conversation with the Farm Service Agency's administrator, Zach Dugenot, and the Farm Service Agency's state executive director for Pennsylvania, Heidi Secord. And here's a little bit of Zach Dugenot.
We made a concerted effort in the 2018 Farm Bill to make sure that everybody in the country was aware that Indian country still had ag production and it's still a vital part of our communities. Because of a focused and successful advocacy effort, we got 63 provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill specifically related to Indian country. How does that qualify me for the Farm Service Agency? A lot of the direction that we're taking in agriculture, this regenerative movement, the holistic approaches, soil health, frankly, that's what was going on this continent when the Europeans came across. We've been doing it for years, and we still have a lot of indigenous communities that are poised to really demonstrate how that happened, how it can happen again, how vital it is to having a circular economy. I mean, the secretary talked about a circular economy the other day in the House Ag Committee, and it really resonates with me and with what we're trying to do at the IAC when I was there, and now what I think we need to do at the Farm Service Agency in our rural communities. We've got to find the means to help our producers be able to add value to their product in their community so that it inures to the benefit of that community and not just some outsider who's taking the profit with them and never spending any of that money back in that community.
On episode 7, I talked to Morgan Tweet from the Hemp Feed Coalition. She was talking about the letter that the Association of American Feed Control Officials wrote to ag leaders and state policymakers concerning the allowance of hemp in animal feed. And her sort of main point was that that AFCO was sort of conflating cannabinoid hemp with industrial hemp.
HFC has been around for, almost 5 years, and we have almost specifically targeted grain ingredients. So those ingredients derived from the seed, because we knew this barrier to entry was going to be challenging, right? And so we started with the ingredients that we thought had the most applicable use in animal feed, as well as ease of regulatory mindset. And so we have made it very clear that we are not looking at cannabinoids. We're not asking for cannabinoids to be an approved ingredient.
So I think the hemp for feed movement is a huge issue in the hemp space, and it's one that everybody in the hemp space needs to get behind. Whether you're a cannabinoid person or a fiber person, like opening up the grain markets is a big deal for hemp. Episode 8 was another one of those double Steve Groff episodes. You might remember from previous years that there are two guys in Pennsylvania by the name of Steve Groff that are, in the hemp space. One is a farmer in Lancaster County, and the other is a doctor in York County. But I think this episode, episode 8, was my very last double Steve Groff episode because the good doctor, Steve Groff, has moved out of hemp completely into the high THC side of things. But farmer Steve Groff has become one of my favorite people in the space to talk to about farming, about hemp, about soil health, about nutrient density. He's always evolving and learning new things and then sharing those new things with the larger community.
And then also mycorrhizal fungi, which is a word you need to get familiar with if you're going to be in this regenerative agriculture space. It's actually a fungi that attaches itself to the roots of plants, and it feeds off the exudates that the plant gives, captures from the sun, and then it goes out and essentially extends the root system of a plant and can bring in nutrients. So not to get too scientific on you, but I think that's a farmer-friendly way of describing it. So you're extending the ability of a plant to get nutrients. Now here's the problem. When you till the soil, you break up the fungi and kill it. Not totally, but you hamper it. It's like a tornado going through your house. You can fix it, but it sets you back. So that's why trying to reduce our tillage is key to this. And then growing mycorrhiza-friendly crops, be it cash crops or cover crops, to enhance the microorganisms and the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, then we can start to reduce our nutrients that we apply.
Also on this episode, I spoke with Pennsylvania State Senator Judy Schwank, who had just introduced a bill that would allow hemp to be used as a livestock feed.
We issued a co-sponsorship memo, I should say, and it would allow hemp to be grown and fed as commercial feed to horses, pets, and specialty pets and livestock.
On episode 9, I talked to the wellness kitchenista Jessica D. Louise. In 2021, she won an Emmy Award for her lifestyle reality series, Eat Your Way to Wellness. And in 2022, she launched a company called Intention Lifestyles with Pennsylvania hemp entrepreneur Cynthia Petrone-Hudock from Hemp Alternative. Jessica and I talked about hemp as a nutritious ingredient as well as the new business venture.
And we named it Intention Lifestyles because we really wanted to exemplify our intention. Our intention is to create product education classes surrounding hemp, this really powerful ingredient we feel. And, there's intention in the way we're farming the cultivars in a very organic way. There's intention in the effects that it may have on the earth. There's intention in the ingredients that we're going to choose to put into our food products when those go to market. So there's intention behind everything that we do, and that's why we named it Intention Lifestyles.
On episode 10, I interviewed Bob Danielle, president and CEO of a startup company called American Hemp Corporation in Reno, Nevada, where they're working with farmers to build the industry there in Nevada.
And these farmers are alfalfa farmers. So Nevada grows 385,000 acres of the world's finest alfalfa hay. I'd like to take over about 10% of that as a cover crop. If we could get 40,000 acres of industrial hemp growing in Nevada, we'll have a $300 million industry.
The next 4 episodes were my interviews from the NOCO Hemp Expo that took place at the end of March out in Colorado. It was sort of a miracle that I was even there in the first place. I conducted a handful of interviews and published those as special NOCO episodes. The first was with Sergei Kovalenkov. He's a Ukrainian hempcrete builder, founder of the company Hempire, and he's also a board member on the US HBA.
Ukraine is like the alma mater of industrial hemp. Our best fiber institute is more than 70 years old now, and the first varieties of industrial hemp with the very low THC levels that were brought to France and Canada in the 90s, they came from Ukraine, and then in terms of cultivation of hemp, we didn't have a problem specifically for fiber and grain. So we have the biomass locally. We developed a binder that is made 100% from local raw materials. So basically the task was for me to develop a material that would be 100% independent from import, so we relied only on local supplies, and we have successfully achieved that, and now we are trying to kind of move this forward. Now I'm one of the founding members of US Hemp Building Association, the only European on the board of directors, and now we're trying to educate people in the United States how magnificent this material really is.
Sergei talked a lot about the resolve of the Ukrainian people and how he hoped that, the worst of the war was over at that point, 3 or 4 weeks into it. But, here we are some 300 days later, the war still rages on. But he was very inspiring. He was able to, pull out some silver linings, and one of which was, they can rebuild the country with hempcrete. The next interview I conducted was with J.J. Johnson. He's a hemp educator out of Texas, also a very inspiring man. He came to hemp through treatment for PTSD and learned a lot about hemp and wanted to share that knowledge with people. And he conducts classes that he calls Hemp 101, teaching farmers and other folks about how to navigate their way into the hemp industry.
I can talk about rules and regulations. I can talk about the medical side of the plant. I can transition and talk about the industrial side of the plant. I can transition and talk about testing. And I can give some lessons learned and some tips based on my practical experiences of helping these farmers, get things done. So I'm able to touch on all of these things in about an hour, hour and a half. And it helps me with my protector mindset, because I feel like I'm protecting these people who are the salt of the earth. They're so good and they want to do good, and they're trying to get in this industry and they don't know where to go.
And without farmers, we have nothing.
We have nothing. You're 100% correct.
And then I sat down and talked to Maren Krings. She's a German climate impact storyteller who had recently published a book called H is for Hemp that documents her travels around the world. She visited 4 continents and conducted hundreds of interviews documenting how various peoples and cultures around the world are using hemp to combat the effects of climate change. The book is part hemp encyclopedia, part anthropological study, and part personal diary. It's over 600 pages and is printed on specially designed tree-free hemp paper.
I was commissioned for a magazine to make a documentary or a reportage about the traditional wheat cutting in Italy. And then I met this hemp farmer. And when he introduced himself as a hemp farmer, in fact, I misunderstood. I thought, this guy's telling me at 6 o'clock in the morning in front of the church tower that he's a drug dealer. Because I was completely unenlightened about industrial hemp. And this is where my journey started. Then he gave me a pep talk on all the positive, like hemp's potential in total. I decided that can't be true because I had never heard about any of this before, and then kind of, brushed it off, continued the journey, and found hemp and found hemp and found hemp. And eventually, after half a year, I don't know if I was really frustrated, but anyhow, I just decided, okay, that's it. This plant keeps crossing any path, anything I touch. At the end, it's hemp. So I decided to actually fully dedicate my time to documenting hemp and really researching also this whole industrial rediscovery of, sorry, get a word twister in here, the rediscovery of industrial hemp. And also the interesting thing was how that was so differently applied, whether you are in Sweden or in Italy or in Slovenia or in France.
The final interview I conducted at NOCO was with Joe Hickey. I think he's from Kentucky. And if you know much about the hemp history of the 1990s, you know that Joe, along with actor and activist Woody Harrelson, the guy from Cheers, they planted hemp seeds in order to get Woody arrested, to sort of make a point.
And so from 94 to 96, we were doing, essay contests for high school students, and Woody was giving out the prizes. And I think he was doing the People versus Larry Flint, when Larry Flint was, his character was testing the law. And so Woody and I came up with the idea of let's plant 4 hemp seeds. 5 would be a felony, 4 is a misdemeanor.
So lots of great stories, lots of inspiration at NOCO last year. I'm looking forward to getting back to NOCO this year. And remember, if you want to hear these interviews in their entirety, you just go back to LancasterFarming.com and find them, or on your podcast app, whatever. But all of the stuff that I'm playing here today, there's a whole lot more where that came from. So that brings us up to episode 15, where I talked to Jacob Waddell, who at the time was the executive director of the U.S. Hemp Building Association. At the time, the ICC had just approved the proposal for hempcrete construction to be added to the International Residential Code.
So what just happened was we were approved, and if we get through to approval in October, the next step is adoption into the states. So even though we're approved into the model code, the states it's not in the state code until it's adopted. Certain states, I believe like Maryland, just accept the code automatically. So that's an easy win. But after that, we'll have to seek adoption in other states in order to really have this on the books.
This past fall, hempcrete construction was added to the index for the residential code. And since then, Jacob Waddell has founded the Hemp Building Institute. On episode 16, I talked to a dairy farmer out in California by the name of Blake Alexander, whose family farm, called Alexander Family Farm, up in Northern California, is America's first certified regenerative dairy.
So there's management-intensive grazing and rotational grazing, and all those are wonderful tools that I'd learned about, 40-some years ago. Then there's the organic matter that I was really learning about for the first time and really understanding it. and this awareness that as we build that organic matter in our soil, it's the sponge that literally holds everything. It holds more moisture and holds more nutrients, and it holds more biology.
On episode 17, I had 3 guests to talk about the industrial hemp exemption. We talked to Courtney Moran from Agricultural Hemp Solutions, Morgan Tweet from I&D Hemp and the Hemp Fee Coalition, and Erica Stark from the National Hemp Association. This is Courtney Moran.
So what we're proposing through the hemp exemption is still to require farmers to get that license or permit to grow so that our law enforcement and our departments of agriculture know where the crop is going. But when they're actually getting that license, they would now have the option to make a designation or a declaration that they are only growing for grain and fiber. And if they select that and make the declaration, yes, I'm only growing grain and fiber, they would no longer have to have a background check. They would still be required to have a visual inspection of their crop. And as long as that visual inspection verified that, yes, they are only growing for grain and fiber, that they would no longer have to go through that sampling and testing requirement that floral producers or cannabinoid hemp producers would have to and are currently going through. And so that way our grain and fiber farmers they're still being tracked in a sense so that law enforcement knows who's growing what where, right? We're not to full cannabis legalization yet. And so there's still a lot of concern from the law enforcement side, but that we're treating our grain and fiber farmers as close to traditional farmers as we can today.
You can learn more about this initiative at hempexemption.com. I'm going to quickly gloss over episode 18, which was about the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit, which, let's admit, was really poorly attended and not a lot to talk about. Episode 19 was my conversation with Bruce Dietzen, who you might remember as the guy who built the car out of hemp a few years ago. He's involved in a project now called Drawdown Hemp, where he's trying to quantify hemp's ability to sequester carbon.
The reason for wanting to quantify those hemp products goes back to this idea that hemp can be made into 50,000 different products. But we're facing a climate crisis, and where the IPCC is stating that we may only have 8 years left to reduce our overall amount of CO2 that we're dumping into the atmosphere by as much as 45%. We have to do that, and then we have to take a lot of CO2 out of the atmosphere, et cetera. So when you take a look at 50,000 products and you go, okay, which one of them can make the biggest impact?
On episode 20, I talked to Jordan Berger. He's a filmmaker down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he's working on a documentary film series about the hemp plant called One Plant. And I interviewed him then, and then I spent some time with him and his crew out in Montana, and then they visited me here in Pennsylvania, I think in September. But so a lot has happened, I think, with the project since I interviewed him back on episode 20. So let's just call him up right now and see what's happening.
Hello, this is Jordan.
Hey, Jordan. It's Eric Herlock at the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Eric. Doing good, man. How are you doing?
Doing all right. So I'm sitting here in my studio and I'm putting together like a year in review final episode for the year. I'm going through it. I'm kind of like picking out different clips for the show. And then I got to your episode and I was like, so much has happened, I think, with the documentary since I first talked to you back in like May or whenever it was. So I thought we'd check in and just sort of see, how the progress on the documentary is coming along.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's the end of the year already. It's a lot has been happening since we last talked. We have traveled to Canada. We've traveled up the Northeast, up into Vermont and New York and Pennsylvania. We've traveled to California, done a little Southeast tour. So between those 4 kind of main trips, we've had some other ones dotted in there. Mm-hmm. We've captured about 50 interviews at this point, which is quite a bit, considering each interview is, an hour to 2 hours each.
Yep.
It's a tremendous amount of content. I think I'm just learning that, this story is, it's big, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of things surrounding hemp and cannabis, and super exciting. But it's also just like, a lot to kind of take in and figure out, what is going to tell the best story here in a entertaining and in a way that keep people engaged. So
right. Cool. I wonder if you can kind of like maybe touch on some of the, I don't know, some of your favorite interviews over the past few months.
Yeah, for sure. We started, I think we might have had a check-in since then, but we started up in Montana, and that was really great. I was just looking through Ken Elliott's interview yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah, there's a lot of great things in there. I think Ken is going to be a prominent character in at least the climate portion of this. He's a great one. And then, so many people. Honestly, it's been great. Eric, your interview is honestly one of my favorites. It's just got some personality, and I love it. I think it's great. Let's see. This last trip, we were out in California and talked to a guy named Ron Alcalay. He's been selling hemp clothing in Venice Beach for the past 30 years.
Nice.
He's a great one. I recommend reaching out to him for your show if you haven't. He's just he's a character, and he doesn't really require much prompting, but he really kind of embodies, in my mind, kind of the themes of this whole project, which is just, hey, we need to do better. We need to turn back to nature, and this is a plant that can guide us that way. Anyway, I really like him a lot. Ron Alcalay is his name. But honestly, everybody. We talked to Dr. Bronner as well, David Bronner from Dr. Bronner's. That was a really fun one. We got to see some the soap being made and hear some of his stories about, getting sawed out of a cage in front of the White House for growing a hemp seed plant in 2008, I think.
Wow.
Anyway, so many stories.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you're working on like the pilot episode now. Do you have any idea when production will be complete on that?
I think we're going to be continuing to shoot as editing is going on. I think with these things, we're casting a very wide net at first and seeing, okay, who are we gravitating towards? What characters in this thing are will the audience fall in love with, and that type of thing. And our plan is to go back and revisit a few select people. So we're going to continue to be shooting as editing is going on. The first step is to make a 10-minute cut, which I'm trying to have by the end of January. So in another month, hopefully we'll have like a little bit more kind of proof of concept of what the thing's going to feel like. And then episode 1, the full episode, by June is what we're hoping.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, we're bringing on a full-time editor starting in January, and that's really going to help a lot because it's going to allow us to continue to shoot while it's being put together.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It's one more thing to look forward to in the new year. So keep us posted on that.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I will. It's a big project. It's even bigger than I think I anticipated, but it's a lot of work. I've never tackled anything like this, but exciting and yeah. Thanks for checking in, man. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
And I know I've told you this a lot, but you've been a tremendous help with just the connections and everything. So I can't thank you enough, and I'm ready to come back and visit you as well.
All right. Well, yeah, you're welcome. I mean, my guiding philosophy here is we're all in this together. So,
all right.
Yeah. But all right. Well, Jordan, I hope you have, great holiday season, great new year, and we'll catch up with you, maybe around the time that your 10-minute clip comes out.
Okay. Sounds good, Eric. Thanks for checking in, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
You can learn more about the film series by going to the website oneplant.film. Episode 21 was my interview with Mike Liago, founder and CEO of iHempX in Colorado. Formerly known as International Hemp Exchange, iHempX has become one of the industry's go-to sources for genetics, processing equipment, farmer resources, and more, serving all sectors of the industry from cannabinoid flower to fiber and grain and everything in between.
We've got a number of different projects and collaborations in the works here, from genetics to farming to processing to offtake opportunities. We really see a lot of potential kind of in that offtake opportunity and that R&D that needs to happen down there, and working with companies to help them find the appropriate counterparts in the industry.
On episodes 22 and 23, I called up a ton of farmers all over the place, Pennsylvania, Alaska, Kansas, Maryland, the Ukraine, to hear how spring planting was going. Here's Roman Fedorovich in Ukraine.
The other issue is that where the fighting is going on in the south, the east, and the northeast, obviously there's no spring planting going on, and there'll be no harvest going on.
Right.
And on top of that, many regions west of Kiev and north of Kiev and east of Kiev were mined by the Russians when they were pushed out.
Here's Catherine Dubansky from Backbone Hemp in Garrett County, Maryland.
We scaled back a lot this year, trying to just not grow more than we need, because I'm sure the other farmers out there can identify with maybe just having a little more than you needed. And because we've got a nice supply of full spectrum distillate in stock, we just decided to go with a small amount of triploid genetics this year.
That reminds me, I need to check back in with Catherine to hear about how those triploids did. Here is Ray DePriest from Sunray Hemp up there in Alaska at 62 degrees north.
You know, the biggest challenge is we're like an island, sort of, kind of like Hawaii. You know, if you want to do anything, it's freight. It always comes down to freight, getting equipment, fertilizer, etc. Here. And so the first year I grew X59, I got my seed from IND Hemp. Ben Brinlow there and Ken Elliott were very helpful.
I like how you can hear the airplane flying over while he's talking about paying for freight. And here's Theo Wakabushcook from Prairie Band Ag in Kansas.
Yeah, so 2022, we are doing about 5 different varieties and a little over 200 acres. Have a couple French varieties, a couple Polish varieties, and then a variety from here in the States.
So I'm not going to play clips from everybody that I talked to on these spring planting episodes, just because this episode's already getting pretty long. But I'll run down the list of people I did check in with back then. Eric Trachtenberg at Paradise Hemp Farm in West Grove, Pennsylvania. Mike Murray from Mocha Hemp in Burlington, PA. Rusty Peterson with Essen Atlas and Align Agro in Michigan. And I will add that this past year, Rusty took a full-time job with IND Hemp and has moved with his family to Montana. We also checked back in with Victor Allen Weeks at 40420 in North Carolina, Jeff Limbaugh at Midwest Natural Fiber in Missouri, Alan Baldwin from South Bend Industrial Hemp in Kansas. We heard from Steve Groff at Cedar Meadow Farm in Holtwood, Pennsylvania, Dale Norley from Tusunka Farm Organics in Birch Runville, PA. We heard from Caleb Kaufman of Lancashire Hemp Farms in Narvon, Pennsylvania, and Ben Brimlow, the lead agronomist at IND Hemp in Montana. So I admit that one of my favorite things to do on this podcast is call people up and talk to them. I guess actually that's the premise of the whole show. But anyway, I am just deeply grateful for the opportunity to do this work and to connect with people around the country and around the world. On episode 24, I talked to Wendy Mosher, president and CEO of New West Genetics out there in Colorado. And we talked about an initiative that her company is working on called Value the Seed that promotes certified seed as a way to unburden farmers and assure regulators of compliance.
Value the Seed is a legislative initiative to improve regulation and reduce onerous regs on growers, as well as sort of assist regulators to reduce their regulation as well.
I first met Wendy when we stopped by the New West Genetics offices in Fort Collins, Colorado, back in the summer of 2021 when we were on the National Hemp Tour. Every time I talk about New West Genetics, I also like to give a shout out to Emma. Hi, Emma. Episode 25 was about the Global Hemp Association and their national variety trials. Here's Mandy Kerr explaining what the Global Hemp Association is all about. So first, right out of the gate, what is the Global Hemp Association?
We're a platform of entrepreneurs, manufacturers, farmers, distributors that have come together to support and build the industrial hemp industry, lift it up. So,
The Global Hemp Association was conducting variety trials in like 10 different states around the country with the help of Melissa Nelson Baldwin. You know her from South Bend Industrial Hemp. She's a field scientist, hemp farmer, and her company, Performance Crop Research, was actually conducting the research for these variety trials.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Mandy came to me last fall and she had this vision of putting out a national variety trial. And the reason that she felt so passionate about this was she really wanted to give reputable data that had a solid foundation for data collection. So for example, my background is a crop research scientist. So this is what I do for a living, is collecting data, really focusing on the details and seeing what maybe more than what just farmers see in the day-to-day operation. Like I'm spending a lot of time walking fields, etc. So when she came to me and wanted to do this, I said, yes, I've got the perfect team to make that happen. We're working with research scientists within the National Alliance of Independent Crop Consultants. This is what everyone does full time.
2022 was the first year for these variety trials, but they plan to conduct these over many years to provide as much data as possible for farmers and processors. All right, so that does it for the first half of 2022. That brings us up to speed on the first 25 episodes. There's another 25 to go, including this one? Can I review the review in the review? I don't know. But anyway, before we wrap it up totally for this episode, I wanted to tell you about something. So I don't know how much you listen to the closing credits of each episode, but at the very end of each show, I give credit where credit is due, and I always give a shout out to Tin Bird Shadow for providing the music for this show. And so I don't know if you're curious about Tin Bird Shadow, like what is it? Is that a person? Is that a band? Is that like a creative studio? Well, yeah, kind of all of the above. So I wanted to give you a little more information on that because Tin Bird Shadow now has a Patreon page where you can go to and you can learn more about Tin Bird Shadow. You can support Tin Bird Shadow if you want. You can get access to all kinds of exclusive content, including music and interesting non-hemp related podcasts and other sort of creative endeavors made by Tin Bird Shadow, which is what really? Okay, I admit, it's me. It's sort of like the other side of my creative life here. I know you want to think that I'm all about hemp all the time, but I do other things. I'm a creative being in this world, and I've been making stuff for a long time, and I'm excited to share these things with you. So if you get a chance, check out patreon.com/tinbirdshadow. Okay, so that brings us to the close of our Year in Review Part 1. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. So check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. And be sure to check out these episodes. If you missed any of these shows throughout the year, go back and listen to them again. I think it's worth your while. There's a lot of great information here, a lot of great conversation. So thanks again for listening. And we'll see you on part 2 here in a little bit.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2022 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock, and the music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. But we also did hear a little clip of Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention playing Moving to Montana.